Dying for a billionaire is the biggest scam of the century. I should know. I took a bullet for Dominic Reed. After spending 5 years fixing his endless messes, starting with the very night he stumbled into my hotel room, drugged and demanding salvation. He called it destiny. I called it a hostage situation, masked as romance. When I opened my eyes and saw that cheap hotel ceiling again, hearing him crash through my door, I didn't grab the first aid kit. I grabbed my phone. Pain is a fantastic anchor. It grounds you. It tells you exactly where you are and what is happening to your body. 5 minutes ago, I was bleeding out on the cold concrete of a subterranean parking garage, clutching my stomach, while Dominic Reed yelled at his security detail instead of looking at me. I had thrown myself in front of a hollow-point bullet meant for him. My reward was the suffocating smell of exhaust fumes, the metallic taste of my own failing organs, and the realization that I had wasted my entire life keeping a monster alive. Then the concrete vanished. Air ripped into my lungs. I shot up from a mattress that was entirely too soft, gasping, clawing at my stomach. No blood, no bullet hole, just the oversized cotton t-shirt I used to sleep in during my 2nd year of medical residency. The room smelled heavily of industrial bleach and stale lavender air freshener. A cheap bedside clock with glaring red digital numbers read 11:42 p.m. October 14th, the Chicago Medical Convention. My heart slammed against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew this night. Every detail of it was burned into the darkest corners of my memory. This was the night the axis of my world violently shifted. This was the night Dominic Reed, CEO of Reed Technologies, got slipped a potent experimental designer drug by a corporate rival, a chemical cocktail designed to induce severe fever delirium and uninhibited aggression. In my previous life, he had managed to stagger away from the VIP club, downstairs bypass security, and randomly crash through the faulty lock of room 412, my room. In that life, I panicked. My residency training kicked in. I saw a dying man, and I saved him. I dragged his 200-pound frame into the bathtub, packed him in ice from the hallway machine, pushed fluids, monitored his vitals through the night, and endured his delirious wandering hands. I saved him, and in return, he decided I belonged to him. 5 years of psychological torture, corporate espionage, and toxic manipulation followed, culminating in a bullet to the gut. A heavy thud against the hallway door snapped me out of the past. Wood splintered. The cheap chain lock rattled furiously. Someone was throwing their entire body weight against the door. Thump, crack. The door gave way, swinging inward and slamming against the drywall. There he was, Dominic Reed. He didn't look like the untouchable billionaire that graced the covers of financial magazines. He looked like a feral animal. His custom Italian suit jacket was torn at the shoulder. His silk tie hung loosely around his neck like a noose. Sweat poured down his face, pasting his dark hair to his forehead. His eyes were wide pupils, blown out completely black, darting around the dimly lit room until they locked onto me. "Help!" He ground out his voice, a gravelly, commanding bark, even in his incapacitated state. "Burning!" He took a staggering step forward, tripping over the threshold. He collapsed onto the cheap floral carpeting, his breathing heavy and ragged. I sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't move. I didn't rush forward to check his pulse. I didn't ask him what he had taken. I just watched him. It was jarring. to see him so utterly pathetic. For 5 years, this man had dictated what I wore, who I spoke to, and where I worked. He had controlled my finances and isolated me from my family under the guise of protection. Now he was just a sweaty, groaning mess on a Marriott floor, struggling to push himself up on shaking arms. "You," he gasped, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Ice, water, now." Even dying, he gave orders. He expected the universe to bend to his discomfort. He expected me to jump. I slowly reached over to the bedside table. My fingers bypassed the heavy glass water pitcher. They bypassed my medical bag resting on the chair. I picked up the chunky beige landline phone. "Who?" Dominic slurred his head, swaying, as he tried to focus on my hand. "Who are you calling? Put that down." No police, no hospitals. He remembered that much, at least. He knew a hospital visit with illegal experimental narcotics in his system would tank Reed Tech's stock by morning. His PR team had likely drilled the protocol into his head. Hide, survive, call the fixers. I lifted the receiver to my ear. The dial tone hummed steadily. I pressed 911. "Operator, what is your emergency?" A calm female voice asked. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. "I am a guest at the downtown Marriott room, 412. A man has just kicked my door in. He is highly aggressive, delirious, and appears to be under the influence of heavy narcotics. He is refusing to leave." Dominic's jaw dropped. A flash of pure, unadulterated rage cut through the haze of his intoxication. "What are you doing?" he roared, trying to scramble to his feet. His knees buckled immediately, sending him crashing, face first, into the edge of the television stand. A thin line of red opened up on his cheekbone. "Ma'am, are you in immediate danger?" The operator asked, her tone sharpening. "Is he armed?" "I don't know," I lied smoothly. "He's much larger than me. He's bleeding and screaming. Please send officers quickly. I am terrified. Units are being dispatched. Stay on the line with me. Can you lock yourself in the bathroom?" "Yes," I said. I stood up. The carpet felt rough beneath my bare feet. I walked past Dominic, who was now clutching his head, groaning in a mixture of agony and disbelief. He reached out his hot, sweaty fingers, grazing my ankle. I kicked his hand away with a swift, sharp motion. "You bitch," he hissed, his eyes rolling back slightly as another wave of the drug hit his system. "Do you know who I am? I will ruin you. I'm in the bathroom now," I told the operator, stepping inside and locking the flimsy wooden door. I sat on the edge of the porcelain bathtub, the very same tub I had once filled with ice to save his miserable life. "I'll wait here." Through the thin door, I could hear him thrashing. I could hear him cursing, throwing things. A lamp shattered. Someone in the hallway yelled. I leaned my head against the cool bathroom tiles, closed my eyes, and smiled. The timeline was broken. The savior was dead. Let the chips fall exactly where they belonged. Blue and red lights painted the frosted bathroom window in frantic strobing flashes. It took the police exactly 9 minutes to arrive. From my spot on the edge of the bathtub, I listened to the chaotic symphony of Dominic Reed's downfall. Heavy boots pounded down the hallway carpet. Deep voices shouted commands. "Chicago PD, step back from the door. Show me your hands." Dominic's response was a slurred, arrogant string of profanities. "Get off me. I own half the real estate in this district. If you touch me, I'll have your badges on my desk by morning. Suspect is resisting. Take him down." A loud crash shook the adjoining wall. I flinched, but it wasn't out of fear. It was pure, unadulterated satisfaction. The sound of a billionaire hitting the floor under the weight of 2 patrol officers was infinitely sweeter than any classical concerto. I heard the sharp, metallic ratcheting of handcuffs being pulled tight. Dominic let out a howl of pain, followed by a string of threats that sounded increasingly unhinged as the designer drug scrambled his frontal lobe. "Ma'am, it's Officer Miller. The area is secure. You can come out now." I unlocked the bathroom door and pushed it open, keeping my posture hunched, my arms wrapped tightly around my shoulders. I widened my eyes and let my breathing turn shallow and erratic. Playing the victim was easy when you remembered how it actually felt to be one. The hotel room was entirely wrecked. The television was face down on the carpet. My suitcase had been kicked over clothes scattered everywhere, and there pinned face down in the center of the room was Dominic. 2 officers had their knees pressed into his back. His expensive suit was ruined, covered in carpet lint and blood from the cut on his face. He was panting heavily, sweat dripping from his nose. When he heard the bathroom door open, he wrenched his neck to look at me. The hatred in his eyes was visceral. "You," he spat foam, gathering at the corners of his mouth. "I will find out who you are. You're dead." "Hey, shut your mouth," Officer Miller barked, pressing Dominic's head back down into the carpet. He looked up at me, his expression softening instantly. "Are you all right, miss? Did he touch you?" "No," I whispered, letting my voice tremble just enough. He broke the door down. He was screaming about burning. I didn't know what to do." "You did the right thing, calling us," a second officer, a stern-looking woman named Jenkins, said as she pulled out a notepad. "He's clearly high out of his mind. We found a discarded vial in his jacket pocket. We'll get him out of your hair right now." They hauled him to his feet. Dominic stumbled his legs, refusing to support his weight. He looked utterly deranged. His hair was sticking up in wild tufts, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was drooling slightly as the drug reached its peak. "Take a good look, sweetheart." Dominic sneered at me as they dragged him toward the shattered doorframe. "Remember my face? I don't think anyone is going to forget it tonight," I replied softly. They hauled him out into the hallway. The convention hotel was fully booked, and the commotion had naturally drawn a crowd. As I stepped out of the room to give my statement, I saw at least 20 people lining the corridor. Doctors, pharmaceutical reps, medical students, and nearly every single one of them had their smartphone out. Camera flashes strobed in the dim hallway. Video recording lights glowed like a constellation of red stars. Dominic didn't have the presence of mind to hide his face. He fought the officers the whole way down the hall, screaming obscenities, threatening to sue the entire city, his face twisting into grotesque, ugly sneers. It was a PR nightmare, caught in brilliant 4K resolution. I spent the next 2 hours dealing with hotel management and the police. I gave a watertight, factual statement. I was sleeping. The door was breached. An intoxicated man entered my room aggressively. I feared for my safety. I called 911. I signed the paperwork, accepted a room upgrade to a suite on the top floor from the deeply apologetic hotel manager, and finally collapsed into a fresh bed. Around 3 a.m., I woke up 6 hours later to the sound of my alarm. I didn't feel tired. I felt electrified. I ordered a massive room service breakfast, pancakes, bacon, 3 cups of black coffee, and turned on the television. I didn't even have to flip channels. It was on every single local broadcast, and it was rapidly climbing the national feeds. Billionaire tech mogul arrested in drug-fueled hotel rampage. The screen showed cell phone footage from the hallway. It was worse, or better, depending on how you looked at it, than I had imagined. Without context, Dominic didn't look like a tragic victim of corporate poisoning. He looked like an entitled rich junkie who had decided to prey on a female hotel guest. The anchor's voice was grim. Dominic Reed, CEO of Reed Technologies, is currently being held without bail after violently breaking into a woman's hotel room at the downtown Marriott last night. Police reports indicate Reed was highly aggressive and heavily intoxicated on unknown narcotics. Reed Technologies stock has plummeted 14% in pre-market trading this morning as investors panic. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was an unknown number. I took a sip of my coffee, relishing the bitter warmth, and answered. "Hello, Ms. Harper." A cold, distinctly corporate voice said, "My name is Gideon. I represent Mr. Dominic Reed. We understand there was a misunderstanding last night." I smiled at the television screen. Dominic's mugshot had just popped up. He looked like a cornered rat. "There was no misunderstanding, Gideon," I said, casually, cutting a piece of bacon. "A man broke into my room. The police arrested him. It's a matter of public record now. We are prepared to offer you a substantial sum for your silence and a signature on a non-disclosure agreement regarding the events in your room." Gideon pressed his tone, tightening. "Name your price. In my past life, I had signed away my voice for nothing, just for the privilege of being near him." "My price?" I chuckled, chewing the bacon slowly. "My price is watching him rot. Don't ever call this number again, Gideon. If you do, I'll tell the media his legal team is harassing a victim." I hung up, blocked the number, and leaned back into the plush pillows. The media was already making him look like a monster. But I knew the truth. They weren't making him into anything. They were just finally showing the world exactly what he was. And this was only day one. Breakfast tasted better with a side of corporate ruin. I finished my third cup of coffee, turned off the television, and got dressed for the convention. I chose a sharp-tailored navy suit, the kind of armor a serious medical professional wears when they have absolutely nothing to hide. Walking into the main exhibition hall of the Chicago Medical Convention felt surreal. In my past life, I had spent this exact morning scrubbing Dominic's vomit out of a hotel rug, terrified of hotel housekeeping, discovering the illegal, dying billionaire in my bathtub. I had missed the keynote speaker. I had missed the networking event that could have secured my fellowship. I had traded my future for a man who would eventually view my life as an expendable asset. Today, I took a seat in the second row of the grand auditorium. The low murmur of the crowd wasn't about the upcoming lecture on advanced cardiovascular pharmacology. It was about him. Hundreds of doctors, researchers, and pharmaceutical reps were hunched over their glowing phone screens, whispering furiously. "Did you see the toxicology leak?" A resident beside me muttered to her colleague. "They're saying he was hopped up on some synthetic amphetamine analog. Stuff isn't even on the street yet. I heard he assaulted a woman on the 4th floor." Her friend replied, eyes wide. "Security had to practically pry him off the door." I opened my notebook and clicked my pen, my face a mask of polite indifference. By noon, Dominic Reed's situation had devolved from a scandalous hotel incident into a full-blown federal investigation. When you are a high-profile CEO handling classified government tech contracts, an arrest for erratic behavior, and illegal designer drugs, triggers immediate security clearance reviews. The board of directors at Reed Technologies convened an emergency meeting at 10 a.m. By 12:30 p.m., the stock had dropped another 9%. They were bleeding money, and Dominic was the open wound. I knew his team wouldn't take this lying down. Dominic employed a shadow army of crisis managers, fixers, and vicious PR attack dogs. If they couldn't buy my silence, they would attempt to destroy my credibility. It was their standard playbook: silence the victim by making them the villain. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I was browsing a row of medical imaging booths. I stepped into a quiet alcove near the emergency exits and pulled it out. An alert from a major online tabloid flashed across the screen. Was it a Trap exclusive, The Mystery Woman behind the Dominic Reed hotel scandal? I clicked the link. The article was a masterpiece of character assassination, undoubtedly orchestrated by Gideon and his team of expensive vultures. It didn't name me directly. They were legally cautious about defamation, while a police investigation was active. But the implications were heavy, deliberate, and toxic. The piece cited anonymous sources close to the investigation who claimed the hotel room door was already unlocked. They suggested the alleged victim was an opportunistic medical resident, heavily burdened by student debt. They painted a picture of a calculated gold digger who saw a wealthy, intoxicated man wandering the halls and lured him in to secure a massive payday. He was disoriented, the article claimed. She saw a lottery ticket. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. It was infuriatingly predictable. For a brief second, the old fear flared in my chest, the suffocating helplessness of being crushed beneath the heel of a billionaire's influence. In my past life, this fear had paralyzed me. It had made me compliant. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the sterile convention center air fill my lungs. The fear dissolved, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I was not that girl anymore. I knew their strategies because I had spent 5 years watching them execute these exact smear campaigns against whistleblowers, rival CEOs, and discarded mistresses. I knew their weaknesses. I opened my email and drafted a message to a very specific journalist, Fiona Walsh. She was an investigative reporter for a reputable, fiercely independent digital news outlet in New York. More importantly, she had spent the last 2 years trying to expose labor violations in Reed Technologies' overseas manufacturing plants, only to be repeatedly buried by Dominic's legal team. She despised him. She was hungry, fearless, and immune to corporate bullying. To f.walsh@independentwire.com, subject Dominic Reed, /room 412. The truth, off the record first. Fiona, I am the woman from the downtown Marriott. Reed's PR team is currently leaking a false narrative to the tabloids to save his stock. I have the hotel timestamp logs, the 911 call audio transcript, and photographs of the splintered door frame that prove forced entry. I am not looking for a payday. I am looking to set the record straight. Call me. I hit send. The response came 4 minutes later. My phone screen lit up with an incoming call from a New York area code. This is Harper. I answered, keeping my voice steady. If this is a prank, it's a bad one. Fiona's voice was sharp and clipped. But if you're telling the truth, you just became the most valuable person in Chicago. Talk to me. I was asleep. I told her the words, flowing effortlessly. He kicked the door so hard, he splintered the deadbolt out of the frame. I locked myself in the bathroom and called the police. Now, his lawyer, a man named Gideon, is calling my personal cell phone, offering me hush money. And when I refused, this tabloid piece magically appeared. They're trying to discredit you before the arraignment. Fiona said, the sound of furious typing echoing in the background. It's classic Reed. Can you prove Gideon called you? I have the call log, the exact timestamp, and the duration, I said. And I can provide you with a copy of my police statement. Give me an hour. Fiona set her tone, shifting from skeptical to predatory. I'm going to rip their narrative to shreds. Stay away from the windows, Harper. When this drops, the paparazzi are going to swarm your hotel. Let them come, I replied. I hung up. Dominic thought he could drown me in a shallow puddle of tabloid rumors. He forgot that a dying man splashing in the water only attracts bigger sharks. Panic is a predictable beast. It strips away the polished veneer of power and reveals the desperate, ugly machinery underneath. By 4 p.m., my exclusive interview with Fiona Walsh was the #1 trending article on every major social media platform. Fiona didn't just publish my side of the story, she weaponized it. She juxtaposed the sleazy tabloid accusations against the hard, unfeeling data of my evidence. The tabloid claim, the door was unlocked. The reality, Fiona published the high-resolution photo of the shattered wooden door frame, the heavy chain lock twisted and ripped from the drywall. The tabloid claim, she lured him in for money. The reality, Fiona included a partial transcript of the 911 call, highlighting the sheer terror in my voice and my immediate request for police intervention, directly contradicting any intent to extort. The kill shot. Fiona detailed Gideon's early morning phone call, exposing the blatant attempt at witness tampering and bribery by Reed Technologies' legal counsel. The fallout was instantaneous and catastrophic. I sat in the corner of the hotel bar, sipping a glass of club soda, with lime, watching the financial news networks spontaneously combust. Reed Technologies' stock, already bleeding, went into free fall. Trading had to be temporarily halted. You could practically hear the screams of hedge fund managers echoing across the country. Tough day to be a tech bro, a gray-haired cardiologist muttered, taking a seat at the bar next to me and gesturing toward the television. The toughest? I agreed mildly, taking a sip of my drink. My phone vibrated, another unknown number. I let it ring out. Then it buzzed again and again, the desperate cadence of a man losing his grip on reality. I finally answered on the 4th attempt, not bothering with a greeting. You have no idea what you've just done, Dominic's voice hissed through the speaker. It didn't sound like the commanding CEO who gave TED Talks to adoring crowds. It sounded thin, ragged, and steeped in venom. The designer drug might have been mostly flushed from his system, but the withdrawal and the stress were clearly tearing him apart. You're violating your bail conditions by contacting me, Dominic, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. How do you know my lawyer's name? He demanded, ignoring my warning. Who are you? My people tore through your background. You're a nobody, a second-year resident with a clean record and a dead-end career trajectory. So how did you anticipate the PR drop? Who is feeding you information? He couldn't fathom that a nobody could outmaneuver him. His towering narcissism wouldn't allow it. In his mind, I had to be a plant, a corporate spy hired by a rival firm. Nobody is feeding me anything. I replied softly. You kicked down my door, Dominic. You brought this entirely upon yourself. I'm just refusing to clean up your mess. I will bury you." He promised, his breathing heavy. "I have more money than God. I will drag you through civil courts for defamation until you're bankrupt. I'll make sure you never practice medicine anywhere in this country. I will ruin your entire miserable life." I closed my eyes, remembering the cold concrete of the parking garage, the blinding pain in my stomach, the smell of my own blood. He had already ruined my life once. He had taken my youth, my career, and ultimately my last breath. "Are you finished?" I asked. Silence hung on the line for a fraction of a second, heavy with his confusion. He expected tears. He expected apologies or frantic backpedaling. "Your board is meeting right now, aren't they?" I continued, checking my watch. "They're discussing a vote of no confidence. You're a liability, Dominic. The drug test results will be leaked to the federal agencies by morning, and your government contracts will be suspended pending investigation. You can't bury me because you don't even have a shovel anymore. You're too busy digging your own grave. You," he started, his voice cracking slightly, "don't call this number again. The next time we speak, it will be in a courtroom, and I will be looking down at you from the witness stand." I ended the call. I didn't block the number this time. I wanted a record of his harassment. Every frantic, threatening text message he inevitably sent over the next few hours would just be another nail in his meticulously crafted coffin. I finished my club soda, left a generous tip on the bar, and walked toward the elevators. The lobby was beginning to swarm with aggressive paparazzi, their cameras pressed against the glass revolving doors, held back only by the hotel's burly security staff. They were looking for the frightened, victimized medical resident. They wouldn't find her. She died in a subterranean parking garage a lifetime ago. I rode the elevator up to my upgraded suite, feeling a profound, intoxicating sense of peace. The media had done their job. The narrative was permanently out of his control. Dominic Reed was no longer a visionary leader. He was a violent, unstable liability. And the best part, I didn't even have to lie to destroy him. I just had to step out of the way and let gravity do the work. Monday morning arrived, with the sterile smell of ethanol and cheap cafeteria coffee. Stepping back into the chaotic rhythm of Chicago Memorial Hospital was a bizarre comfort. The convention was over. The hotel was behind me, but the shock waves of room 412 were already vibrating through the linoleum corridors of my workplace. Hospitals are ecosystems driven by gossip and terror of liability. By the time I swiped my badge at the resident locker room, at least 4 nurses had stopped chatting to stare at me. I ignored them, swapping my street clothes for standard-issue blue scrubs. I tied my hair back, clipped my pager to my waistband, and headed to the surgical floor. I wasn't going to hide. In my previous life, I spent 5 years hiding in penthouse suites and private islands, suffocating under Dominic's shadow. I would rather endure 1,000 staring colleagues than spend one more second making myself small. Dr. Eris Thorne. Wait. No, let's go with Dr. Eris Jenkins. No, Jenkins was the cop. Dr. Eris Cole. He was my attending physician, a man who survived entirely on nicotine patches and sheer anxiety. He cornered me near the nurses' station before I could even pull a patient chart. "Seek Harper," Cole whispered, grabbing my elbow and steering me into an empty supply closet. He shut the door, the sharp scent of iodine and sterile gauze wrapping around us. He looked terrified. "Tell me the hospital legal team has already spoken to you." "They sent an email," I replied, calmly. adjusting my stethoscope. I told them I was off the clock in a private hotel room. In the hospital bears absolutely no liability for a billionaire deciding to practice his kickboxing on my door. You don't understand. Cole ran a hand over his thinning hair. Reed Technologies supplies 40% of the imaging equipment in this building. The hospital administrator is having a massive coronary. They are terrified Reed is going to pull our service contracts out of spite because you talked to that New York reporter. Let him try, I said, leaning against a shelf of saline bags. Dominic Reed doesn't have the authority to pull contracts right now. Have you checked the news today, Dr. Cole? Cole blinked, his anxiety faltering for a second. I've been in a bowel resection since 4 a.m. Why? I checked my watch. It was 9:15 a.m. Because as of 30 minutes ago, the board of directors at Reed Technologies initiated a vote of no confidence. I told him, keeping my tone perfectly clinical, as if presenting a patient's vitals. Federal agents raided his primary development facility in Silicon Valley at dawn. They're looking for the source of the designer amphetamine he was high on. He isn't thinking about our MRI machines, Eris. He's trying to figure out how to stay out of federal prison. Cole stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He was looking at me like he didn't recognize the second-year resident standing in front of him. He was right. The girl he knew would have been hyperventilating into a paper bag. Just do your rounds, Cole finally muttered, stepping back. And if anyone in a suit comes looking for you, you page legal immediately. Someone in a suit did come looking for me, but it wasn't hospital legal. It happened just after my lunch break. I was updating charts in the break room when a tall, broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper hair walked in. He bypassed the coffee machine and stopped directly in front of my table. He held up a leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a gold shield. Agent Caldwell, DEA. He said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. I need 5 minutes, Dr. Harper. Am I in trouble, Agent Caldwell? I asked, closing my laptop slowly. Not unless you're the one who synthesized the Class 1 narcotic Mr. Reed was sweating out of his pores on Friday night. He replied, pulling out a chair and sitting heavily. I read your police statement. You noted his pupils were fully dilated. He was profusely sweating, and he complained of burning. You also noted a severe lack of motor control. I am a doctor, I said smoothly. Observation is my job. Your observations were incredibly precise. Caldwell noted, leaning forward, resting his forearms on the table. Most people who get their doors kicked in by a screaming junkie don't take mental notes on their neurological deficits. They just scream. I did scream internally. Then I relied on my training. What do you want, Agent Caldwell? Reed's lawyers are trying to spin a narrative, Caldwell said, his eyes locking onto mine. They're claiming he was slipped a roofie, a victim of a targeted poisoning by a corporate rival to make him look erratic. They want the charges dropped to a simple misdemeanor public intoxication. They're muddying the waters. In my past life, that was exactly the narrative Dominic used to justify his actions to me. It wasn't me, Harper. I was poisoned. I didn't mean to hurt you. It was a brilliant, manipulative lie. It wasn't a central nervous system depressant. I stated firmly, meeting the federal agent's intense gaze without flinching. He wasn't sedated. He was hyper-aroused, aggressive, paranoiac. He possessed abnormal physical strength enough to splinter a solid core door. If his lawyers are claiming he was slipped a standard date rape drug, they are lying. The toxicology report should confirm that. The tox screen is complex. It's a synthetic cocktail. Not in our database yet. Caldwell admitted tapping his index finger on the table. His defense team is moving to have the blood evidence suppressed due to a supposed chain of custody error at the precinct. If they succeed, your eyewitness testimony about his physical state is all we have to prove he was on an active, aggressive stimulant. Will you testify? He was testing me. He expected the young resident to fold under the threat of facing a billionaire's legal team in open court. Agent Caldwell, I smiled a cold, sharp expression that didn't reach my eyes. I will clear my schedule. Fluorescent lights in courthouses always emit a low, irritating hum that sinks right into your teeth. It was Wednesday morning. The Cook County Courthouse was an absolute zoo. News vans were parked illegally along the sidewalks, their satellite dishes extended toward the gray Chicago sky like mechanical sunflowers. The paparazzi were penned behind metal barricades, screaming questions at anyone in a suit who walked up the concrete steps. I wore a charcoal blazer and a pair of dark slacks. I slipped through a side entrance arranged by the prosecutor's office, bypassing the media circus entirely. Inside courtroom 302, the air was heavily conditioned and smelled of lemon polish and old paper. The wooden pews were packed with reporters. I took a seat in the second row of the gallery, right behind the prosecution table. I folded my hands in my lap, feeling the steady, rhythmic beating of my own heart. I wasn't bleeding. I wasn't trapped. I was exactly where I needed to be. The heavy oak door to the judge's chambers opened, and everyone rose. All rise for the Honorable Judge Davies. The bailiff droned. As we sat back down, a side door near the defense table clicked open. A county sheriff walked out, followed immediately by Dominic. My breath caught in my throat. For a fraction of a second, an involuntary trauma response. But the phantom pain vanished the moment I really looked at him. He looked terrible. The custom suits were gone, replaced by an ill-fitting, standard-issue Navy suit his lawyers had probably rushed in. He had lost weight in just a few days. His skin possessed a sickly, grayish pallor, and the dark circles under his eyes looked like bruises. The cut on his cheekbone, earned by falling onto my television stand, was sealed with a medical adhesive strip. His hands, resting on the defense table, were shaking slightly. The designer drug withdrawal was clearly ravaging his system. Beside him sat Gideon the shark in the expensive pinstripes. Gideon looked stressed, furiously organizing files. When Dominic sat down, he didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at his lawyer. He turned his head and scanned the gallery. His eyes locked onto mine. In my past life, that glare would have sent a spike of pure adrenaline and terror straight through my chest. It was the look he gave me before throwing a glass at the wall. It was the look he gave me when he caught me trying to call my mother. Now, it was just a look from a pathetic detoxing man who was realizing his money couldn't buy a time machine. I didn't look away. I didn't shrink in my seat. I held his gaze, my face a mask of total unbothered calm. I let him see that he had absolutely zero power over me. Dominic's jaw clenched so hard, a muscle twitched in his cheek. He quickly turned his face forward as Judge Davies banged her gavel. Case number 44, B State versus Dominic Reed. The judge announced, reading the docket. Charges include breaking and entering destruction of private property assault and possession of a Schedule I controlled substance. Mr. Reed, how do you plead? Gideon stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. Not guilty on all counts, Your Honor. Furthermore, we are requesting bail be set, so my client can seek immediate medical treatment at a private facility. Mr. Reed is the victim of a targeted chemical poisoning that caused a severe temporary medical episode. The prosecutor, an exhausted-looking woman named Sarah Vance. No Sarah Lynn stood up immediately. Objection, Your Honor. The defendant was not experiencing a medical episode. He was experiencing a narcotic rage. We have the 911 audio, the shattered door, and the responding officer's body cam footage. Furthermore, we have evidence of severe witness intimidation. Judge Davies looked over her glasses. Intimidation. Sarah Lynn pulled a printed document from her file. Within 24 hours of his arrest, the defendant's legal counsel attempted to bribe the primary witness, Dr. Harper. When that failed, the defendant used a smuggled burner phone in his holding cell to call the witness, directly threatening to bankrupt her and destroy her medical career. We have the phone records to prove the call originated from the precinct holding area. A collective gasp echoed through the gallery reporters. Pencils flew across notepads. Dominic's head whipped around to stare at Gideon, panic finally breaking through his arrogant facade. Gideon's face drained of color. He hadn't known about the burner phone call. Dominic had acted on his own narcissistic impulse, and he had just handed the prosecution a loaded gun. "Is this true, counselor?" Judge Davies asked, her voice dropping an octave, her eyes narrowing at Gideon. "Your Honor, my client has been deeply disoriented." Gideon stammered, completely caught off guard. "I don't care if he thinks he's on the moon, counselor," Judge Davies snapped. Threatening a witness, especially a medical professional, while in police custody, is a phenomenal display of arrogance and stupidity. Bail is denied. The defendant is a clear flight risk and a danger to witnesses. Gideon slumped. Dominic shot up from his chair. "You can't do that." Dominic yelled, his voice echoing loudly in the courtroom. He pointed a shaking finger toward the bench. "I am a federal contractor. I require immediate access to my corporate infrastructure. You are destroying my company over a misunderstanding with some lying, opportunistic bailiff." Judge Davies cut him off, her tone like absolute zero. "Remove the defendant from my courtroom." Two sheriffs stepped forward, grabbing Dominic by the arms. He fought them instinctively, just like he had in the hotel hallway, his arrogance overriding his common sense. It was a humiliating, desperate struggle. As they dragged him backward toward the holding door, his eyes found mine one last time in the gallery. He was screaming something about his lawyers, about his money, but I couldn't hear him over the noise of the reporters. I just sat there, watching the heavy wooden door close behind him. The vault was sealed. He was trapped in the system he used to manipulate. I stood up, smoothed the front of my blazer, and walked out of the courtroom. I had a long shift at the hospital ahead of me, and for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I was actually looking forward to it. Hospitals possess a unique ability to erase the outside world. Fluorescent lights replace the sun. Pagers dictate the rhythm of time. For 3 days, following the arraignment, I buried myself in clinical rotations, suturing lacerations, and adjusting dosages. It was a comfortable, sterile routine. I needed the distraction. Knowing Dominic was sitting in a county jail cell without bail was a profound relief, but my nervous system was still recalibrating. You don't just walk away from 5 years of psychological trauma, even if it technically happened in a timeline that no longer existed. Your body remembers the flinching. Thursday afternoon changed the rhythm. Fiona Walsh found me in the 3rd-floor cafeteria. She didn't look like a woman who had just brought down a billionaire titan. She looked exhausted, running on pure caffeine and spite. She bypassed the salad bar, entirely slammed a large iced coffee onto my table, and slid into the plastic booth opposite me. She wore a faded leather jacket and a triumphant, sharp grin. They raided his penthouse, Fiona said, skipping any form of a greeting. She pulled a manila folder from her oversized tote bag and tapped it against the Formica table. Federal agents went in at dawn. They were looking for the rest of his designer stash. They found something infinitely better. I took a slow bite of my lukewarm turkey sandwich. Better than illegal narcotics. Ledgers. Fiona breathed, her eyes lighting up with the vicious joy of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. Digital and physical. Dominic Reed is a paranoid, controlling sociopath, Harper. He didn't just run a tech company. He ran a shadow surveillance network on his own board of directors, his investors, and his political allies. He had blackmail files on everyone. He documented every bribe, every illegal offshore account, every extorted contract. I stopped chewing. A cold chill traced its way down my spine, settling heavily in my stomach. In my past life, Dominic's paranoia had suffocated me. He monitored my phone calls. He had private security tail me to the grocery store. He told me it was because I was precious to him, because the world was dangerous, and he needed to keep me safe. I had spent years believing I was uniquely flawed, uniquely requiring of his suffocating control. Hearing Fiona confirm that his sickness extended to everyone around him was a massive, grounding validation. I wasn't crazy. I was just collateral damage in his war against a world he couldn't completely dominate. Why would he keep ledgers? I asked, pushing my plate away. If he's committing federal crimes, keeping a detailed receipt seems remarkably stupid. Narcissism. Fiona answered, immediately leaning forward. Men like Dominic believe they are untouchable. They don't view these files as evidence of their own crimes. They view them as weapons. It's leverage. If anyone ever tried to cross him, he had the ammunition to destroy them first. But because Judge Davies denied him bail, he couldn't get back to his penthouse to scrub the servers. He couldn't order his security team to destroy the physical drives because his primary fixers are already under federal subpoena. He trapped himself, I murmured, staring at the condensation dripping down her plastic coffee cup. Exactly. The feds hit the jackpot, the DEA went in for drugs, but the FBI and the SEC just took over the entire operation. It's a bloodbath, Harper. Wall Street is hemorrhaging. 3 members of his board of directors have already retained criminal defense attorneys. Fiona paused, her sharp gaze softening just a fraction. You knocked over the first domino. He thought he was untouchable until you called 911. I just refused to play his game, I said quietly. Fiona opened the manila folder and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a printed photograph. I looked down. It was a picture of a white, unmarked van parked across the street from my apartment building. A digital timestamp in the corner read October 12th, 2 days before the medical convention, 2 days before Dominic kicked my door in. What is this? I asked, my voice tightening. The feds found a surveillance dossier in his desk, Fiona said gently. He wasn't randomly wandering the hotel halls, Harper. He didn't just stumble into room 412 by accident. His private security team had been tracking you for a week before the convention. My lungs seized. The cafeteria noise, the clattering trays, the low hum of conversation faded into a dull, distant ringing. He had been watching me. Even before the drug, even before the convention, he had somehow targeted me. In my previous life, I thought he was a random tragedy. that crashed into my hotel room. I thought destiny, or some cruel twist of fate, had thrown us together. But men like Dominic don't leave things to fate. They manufacture their own destiny. They select their targets. "Why me?" I whispered, my fingers trembling slightly as I pushed the photo back toward her. "We don't know yet," Fiona admitted, packing the photo away. "You fit a profile. Young, isolated in debt, completely absorbed in your medical residency. Easy to isolate, easy to manipulate. Or maybe he saw you at a hospital gala and just decided he wanted to own you. The feds are looking into it. But I wanted you to see this so you understand the gravity of what you avoided." I closed my eyes. The phantom pain of the bullet wound flared in my abdomen, a sharp, burning reminder of where his obsession inevitably led. "I'm going to ruin him," I said, opening my eyes. My voice didn't shake. The lingering fear was entirely gone, replaced by a cold, hardened resolve. Whatever the prosecution needs, whenever they need me, I will testify. Fiona smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a woman ready for a war. Good, because his lawyer just threw him to the wolves. Friday brought the corporate execution I had been waiting for. I woke up to an alert on my phone that simply read, "Reed Technologies Board ousts founder. Dominic Reed removed as CEO amid federal probes." It took less than a week, 7 days, to strip a self-proclaimed god of his empire. By noon, I was sitting in a sterile conference room at the district attorney's office in downtown Chicago. Sarah Brooks, the lead prosecutor, who had handled Dominic's disastrous arraignment, sat at the head of the heavy oak table. Agent Caldwell leaned against the frosted glass wall, nursing a black coffee. We were waiting for Gideon. "You don't have to be here for this, Dr. Harper," Sarah said, flipping through a dense legal pad. Plea negotiations with a co-conspirator can get incredibly ugly. Gideon is going to try to paint himself as an unwilling victim of Reed's madness. "I want to see it," I replied, keeping my posture straight, my hands folded calmly on the table. "I want to see how quickly loyalty dissolves when the money stops flowing." The conference door clicked open. Gideon walked in, flanked by his own high-priced defense attorney. He looked unrecognizable. The aggressive, slick corporate shark who had called my cell phone to threaten me was gone. His tailored pinstripe suit looked loose on his frame. His skin was sallow, and his eyes darted nervously around the room, actively avoiding my gaze. He looked like a man who knew he was staring down the barrel of a 10-year federal prison sentence. "Have a seat, Gideon," Sarah said, not bothering to look up from her notes. Gideon sank into a leather chair opposite me. He folded his hands, his knuckles turning white. "I want full immunity." He rasped his voice, devoid of its usual arrogant tenor. "State and federal. In exchange, I will testify to his state of mind regarding the hotel incident, the origin of the narcotics, and I will hand over the encryption keys to his offshore accounts." "Immunity is off the table," Caldwell spoke up from the wall, his gravelly voice echoing in the quiet room. "You facilitated witness tampering. You actively engaged in a conspiracy to cover up the possession of a Schedule I narcotic. Best we can do is recommend a reduced sentence of 36 months in a minimum security facility. Take it, or we walk you out of here in handcuffs right now." Gideon's defense attorney started to argue, citing Gideon's cooperation. But Gideon held up a shaking hand to silence him. The fight was completely drained out of him. Dominic's empire wasn't just crumbling, it was vaporizing, and Gideon knew he was standing on the epicenter of the blast. "He's unstable," Gideon whispered, finally lifting his eyes to look at Sarah Brooks. He always has been, but the designer drug. It fractured something in his head. He isn't sleeping in the county jail. He's raving. He genuinely believes he can buy his way out of this if he just gets back to a phone. He made a phone call from holding. Sarah reminded him coldly. It didn't work out. He told me to destroy her, Gideon said, slowly turning his head to look directly at me. It was the first time he had acknowledged my presence in the room. The morning after the hotel incident, he called me from the precinct. He didn't care about the PR fallout. He didn't care about the stock dropping. He was obsessed with the fact that you walked away. He told me to hire private investigators, find your family, buy your debt. He wanted to trap you. My heart beat a steady rhythmic drum against my ribs. In my past life, that trap had worked perfectly. He had built a gilded cage so quietly, I didn't even notice the doors locking until it was too late. And what did you do, Gideon? I asked, my voice cutting through the thick tension in the room. Gideon flinched. I drafted the NDA. I made the call to offer you the money. When you refused, I leaked the story to the tabloid. It was standard operating procedure for his messes. But I didn't know about the surveillance van, Dr. Harper. I swear to God, I handle the corporate cover-ups, not the stalking. It was pathetic. He was begging a second-year medical resident for absolution because his billionaire meal ticket had bounced. We accept the 36 months. Gideon's attorney interjected smoothly, eager to stop his client from confessing to more crimes on the record. We will provide the encryption keys by end of day. Sarah Brooks nodded, closing her legal pad. Agent Caldwell will take your statement in room B. Get him out of here. I watched Gideon stand up. He looked smaller, deflated. The illusion of his power had been entirely dependent on Dominic's money. Without it, he was just a frightened, desperate man in a wrinkled suit. As Gideon walked toward the door, he paused, looking back at me. He's going to go to trial, you know. His ego won't allow him to take a plea deal. He'll drag you onto the stand. He'll try to humiliate you in front of the entire world. Let him, I said. I didn't offer a dramatic speech. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at him with the absolute certainty of a woman who had already survived the worst thing Dominic Reed could possibly do. Gideon swallowed, hard, nodded once, and walked out. The heavy door clicked shut, severing the last string that connected Dominic to his corporate machine. He was entirely isolated now. No CEO title, no fixers, no shadow network to manipulate the board. He was just a violent man, sitting in a concrete box, waiting for a trial he could not buy his way out of. I stood up, pushing my chair back. I had rounds in an hour. I had patients who actually needed saving. And for the first time in my existence, my future belonged entirely to me. Courtrooms are built to intimidate. High ceilings, rigid oak benches, the heavy silence that settles the moment the judge enters. I spent 6 months waiting for this specific silence. It was late April when State versus Dominic Reed finally went to trial. The snow had melted off the Chicago streets, replaced by a bitter, biting wind. I wore a tailored gray suit. I didn't wear a cross or a lucky charm. I just wore the armor of a woman who had already survived her own murder. Dominic sat at the defense table, but he wasn't the man who had crashed into my hotel room. The Federal Holding Center had scraped away his polish. His cheekbones jutted sharply against his pale, sun-deprived skin. His hair was cropped short, stripping him of the billionaire playboy aesthetic his PR team had spent millions cultivating. He wore a cheap suit, provided by his new court-appointed lawyer. After the SEC froze his assets and his board ousted him, his high-priced defense teams had abandoned ship. He was bankrupt. He was cornered. I took the stand on day 3. Walking past his table, I didn't avert my eyes. I looked right at him. He glared back, his jaw clenching, the muscles jumping beneath his skin. It was the same look of pure, toxic hatred he used to give me when I dared to speak to another man at a hospital gala. Back then, it paralyzed me. Today, it was just pathetic. His court-appointed lawyer, an exhausted man named Peterson, tried his best. He paced in front of the witness box, attempting to poke holes in my timeline. He suggested I had left the door unlocked. He suggested I had recognized Dominic and panicked, embellishing the threat for the 911 operator. "Seek Dr. Harper," Peterson said, leaning against the wooden railing. "Isn't it true that you were struggling with roughly $200,000 in medical school debt at the time of the incident? A payday from a wealthy, disoriented CEO would have been quite convenient, wouldn't it?" "I am a doctor," I answered, my voice steady, projecting clearly across the packed gallery. "I save lives. I don't monetize them. Your client shattered a deadbolt, entered my room under the influence of an illegal designer amphetamine, and terrorized me. My debt is a reality of the American healthcare system. Your client's actions are a reality of his violent narcissism. They are entirely unrelated." A low murmur rippled through the press section. Peterson winced. Dominic couldn't handle it. The loss of control, the public humiliation, the sheer fact that I was sitting above him, dictating his fate, it broke whatever fragile restraint he had left. "She's lying," Dominic erupted, slamming both hands on the defense table and shoving his chair back. The heavy wood screeched against the floor. "She was waiting for me. You planned this. You manipulative bitch. I owned you. I gave you everything." It was a bizarre, chilling slip of the tongue. "I owned you." He was speaking from a timeline that only I remembered, his sick, twisted subconscious bleeding into reality. In his mind, I still belonged to him. Bailiff restrained the defendant. The judge barked, banging her gavel furiously. 2 deputies rushed forward, grabbing Dominic's arms. He fought them fiercely, his face turning a mottled, ugly purple. He screamed obscenities, thrashing against their grip, proving every single point the prosecution had made about his explosive, uncontrollable rage. He looked like a rabid animal fighting a leash. I sat perfectly still in the witness box. I didn't flinch. I just watched him unravel. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When the foreperson stood up to read the verdict, the courtroom held its collective breath. I focused on the wood grain of the pew in front of me, keeping my breathing even and slow. On the count of breaking and entering, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of assault, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of possession of a Schedule I controlled substance, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of witness intimidation, it went on, a cascading avalanche of accountability. Dominic didn't yell this time. He just collapsed into his chair, staring blankly at the polished floor. The reality of his future finally crushed him. The judge handed down the sentence immediately. 25 years in federal prison. No early parole for the drug and intimidation offenses. No luxury cell. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright, biting Chicago afternoon. The paparazzi were waiting their cameras, flashing like strobe lights, reporters shouting my name over the barricades. I didn't stop to give a statement. I didn't need to. Fiona Walsh gave me a brief, sharp nod from the edge of the crowd, a silent acknowledgement of a war completely won. I walked down the concrete steps and took a deep breath. The air tasted cold and clean. For the first time since I woke up in that hotel bed, I reached down and pressed a hand flat against my stomach. Where the bullet had ripped through my flesh in my previous life, there was only solid, unbroken muscle. The phantom pain was completely gone. Dominic Reed was a ghost. I was alive. I hailed a cab, gave the driver the address for the hospital, and went back to work. What would you do if the person who destroyed your life was handed to you on a silver platter? Drop a comment below and let me know if you would have testified like Harper, or if you would have handled the billionaire CEO differently. If you loved watching Dominic Reed's massive empire burn to the ground and seeing him get exactly what he deserved, smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss another revenge story. Share this video with someone who loves a perfect payback.